Hi everyone, welcome back. I did just want to discuss two things before we get into the lecture. The first is that I will be going over my answers to the perception checking discussion posts that you guys have to do. So if you're interested to know more about me and what I personally like, wait till the end because I will go over that there. And the second is I wanted to give you guys a huge kudos, shout out. This is the first semester I've had where pretty much for the most part everyone has turned stuff in the first week, and I personally think the first week is the hardest for students to adjust to, and so the fact that you guys were really, sorry, it worse. I think that's good. So the fact that you guys were already, really on top of it last week, I really, really appreciate it because, the more consistent and on time you guys are, the more I'm able to work with that and get stuff back on a quicker, at a quicker rate. So I just want to say, good job. And now getting into it. Awesome. So I hope I'm not blocking the screen too much, but we're going to go over chapter 3, which is verbal messages. So what we're going to specifically go over is the power of language, denotative versus connotative, concrete versus abstract, and the way that language is bound by context and culture. So if you guys remember, the first principle, which was the last chapter, was over self-awareness and perception. This chapter is going to be over verbal messages. So the power of language is shown in the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which basically states that language shapes our perception and that perceptions shape our behavior. So it's this continuous cycle in what we say affects the way we interpret things, and the way we interpret things changes our behavior, and our behavior changes our language, and it's this consistent cyclical event in which things can change, they can stay the same. It's kind of, if you've ever heard anyone kind of critique the idea of constantly being negative, it's kind of the idea of, because you've already expected negative outcomes, a negative outcome is going to happen. So you can also see this at Disney, and how they discuss the job and the employees there. So instead of calling the workers employees or workers or whatever, they call them cast members who fill roles, and they wear costumes to perform for guests, and they go on and off stage. And so by using this language that is a very theater-based, it alters the way that the cast members go about their job. So instead of seeing their job like a retail worker would, they would see their job as more of a theatrical performance where they are entertaining people. So denotative and connotative, these are pretty simple. Think denotative, textbook, definition, meaning. It's the literal meaning. If you go in a textbook and you look up a word, the denotative meaning is the one that you find. Connotative meanings are going to be more subjective and personal. So, for example, what people define as beautiful, ugly, bad, anything like that is going to have more of a subjective meaning than the definition of the nervous system. Ooh, sorry. So concrete versus abstract. So essentially, a word is concrete if you can check it with your perceptions or your sixth senses. For example, this is an inhaler. We can touch it, we can look at it, we can smell it, but no matter what, it's always going to be an inhaler. You can't sit there and tell me that this is an antidepressant when it is an inhaler. Like, it's you can't argue it. It's hi. Hello. Okay, so now that we've had that distraction, versus an abstract an abstract meaning is going to be something that is much more difficult to agree upon. So for example, the idea of freedom. Freedom is going to mean something different for every single person, even if they are of a homogeneous population. So for example, some people in America will say that freedom is life, liberty, and happiness. Some people are going to have different ideas as to what freedom is. So, culture bound. A culture essentially consists of rules, norms, values of a group of people. And the group of people and those culture norms are kind of defined, redefined, or canceled through time. So for example, they use the word Yankee. Obviously, that's going to mean something different in the North as it is going to mean in the South. In the North, it's going to have more of a baseball and positive connotation versus in the South, it is more associated with, the you Northerners, and kind of like the word itself also, which I think is a great example for moving into context, because the word Yankee is kind of held within the context of the civil rights era, and although it's been used after, it isn't that commonly used now, which I think is also a form of context bound, like not only is it not a word that is commonly used nowadays, when you think of the word Yankee, you think of the civil rights movement, you think of after the civil rights movement, you think of the continuation of Manifest Destiny and the Union and Yeehaw. At least that's what I think about. So that kind of goes into symbols derive their meaning from the situation in which they are used. So I just throwing a theory out, kind of hard to argue for the validity, but one could argue that because there is no large ideological divide between the North and the South, East, West, in the United States anymore, versus like there is no need to have a word such as Yankee, which distinguishes people from the Northeast from people in the South. So that's one possible reason that the word isn't even used anymore, because our societal context has no need for it. And I hope that kind of ended off on a really good example. So we went over the power of language, which was the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, denotative versus connotative, concrete versus abstract, and the ways that language is bound by culture and context. So now that we went over all of that, let me pull up the questions. So the first question is most likely to watch. I'm going to have to say documentary because I only watch documentaries, horror movies, and adult cartoons. Most likely to own a cat, I think this one is pretty easy to check because I included her in my introduction video, and if you haven't seen that, maybe you should watch that because this is the third chapter, and if you didn't get the first video, then I don't know what to tell you. So most likely to listen to, I listen to a lot of rock most. We love a good Midwestern emo. Pop, I guess, would go second. I love glitchcore and I love hyperpop. I think it's really fun. Most likely to be alone, alone, alone. Quarantine has made me hate having to interact with people. Most likely to look for in a partner, which is 5. I don't know, personality, I guess. I feel like I'm a big weirdo, and people usually just think I'm really weird, which is okay, but kind of makes it hard for romantic partners. Most likely to go to live concerts. I love going to them, especially since we are in San Marcos, so we're right in between San Antonio and Austin, which a lot of artists go to, not to mention that Austin has a huge music scene to begin with. Most likely to watch reality TV. I love any type of 90 Day Fiancé. Like the spin-offs, the original, I binge them all. Okay, most likely to use. Okay, I didn't know that they put Tinder and Grindr on here. I think that's weird. I mostly use Snapchat because I've had it for such a long time that all of my photos in there are, you know, like my memory roll goes back like 4 or 5 years, so I just don't know where I would be without it, or like friends that I've made that I never really talk to anymore. Let's see. Most likely to behave as, I'll go with depends on the situation, because I think, yes, I can be very extroverted, but like I answered with my other question, I do like to be alone. So I think it's like an ambivert, I think it's called, where it's like you like to be social, but you have to recharge by being alone. And most likely to react very emotionally. I feel everything, all my emotions that I feel are over the top and multiplied by 10. Like I can't ever just have normal feelings. And so I overreact quite a bit. Quite a bit. But most people find it funny, so I guess that's one bonus. And that was all of the questions from the perception checking worksheet. If you watched this long, I don't know whether to say thank you or I'm sorry. But this is me signing off, and the demon in my bathroom also signing off.